set up mindfulness of the body with a measureless mind, and he understands as it really is that liberation by mind, liberation by wisdom, wherein those evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. Similarly, having heard a sound with the ear, smelt an odor, tasted a taste, etc., he is not intent upon a pleasing sense object and not repelled by a displeasing sense object. He dwells having set up mindfulness of the body with a measureless mind, and he understands as it really is that liberation by mind, liberation by wisdom, wherein those evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. This is called, friends, a monk who is uncorrupted amidst forms cognizable by the eye, uncorrupted amidst sounds cognizable by the ear, uncorrupted amidst odors, taste, touch, and thoughts. When a monk dwells thus, if Mara approaches him to the eye, Mara fails to gain access to him, Mara fails to get a hold on him. Similarly, if Mara approaches him to the ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, Mara fails to gain access to him, Mara fails to get a hold on him. Suppose, friends, there is a peaked house or a hall built of thickly packed clay and freshly plastered. If a man approaches it from the east with a blazing grass torch, or from the west, or from the north, from the south, from below, or from above, whichever way he approaches it, the fire fails to gain access to it. The fire fails to get a hold on it. So too, friends, when a monk dwells thus, if Mara approaches him to the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, Mara fails to gain access to him, Mara fails to get a hold on him. When a monk dwells thus, he overwhelms forms. Forms do not overwhelm him. He overwhelms sounds. Sounds do not overwhelm him. Similarly, he overwhelms odors, taste, touch, and thoughts. This is called, friends, a monk who overwhelms forms, sounds, etc. One who overwhelms and who is not overwhelmed. He has overwhelmed those evil, unwholesome states that defile, that lead to renewed existence, that bring trouble, that result in suffering, and that leads to future birth, aging, and death. It is in this way, friends, that one is uncorrupted. Stop here for a moment. So here you see Venerable Mahamoggallana says, one who is uncorrupted, when he is contacted by these six sense objects, he is not intent upon a pleasing object or repelled by a displeasing object. He dwells having set up mindfulness of the body with a measureless mind. With a measureless mind, that means his mind is very well developed. He has very high concentration. A monk with a very high concentration, with a very strong concentration, the mind is like a rock, not easily shaken. So these external sense objects cannot move him because he dwells within the mind most of the time. So he has his foundation inside is very strong, so not easily shaken. In the first case, the person who is undeveloped in the mind, then his mind is easily moved. So the simile given is you have a shed made of dried reeds and grass and all that. If a man comes with a blazing torch, with a fire, he will easily catch fire. In the second case, the mind that does not move is like a house built of clay and freshly plastered. You bring fire to it also, you cannot burn the clay. Then the Blessed One got up and addressed the Venerable Mahamoggallana thus: Good Moggallana, you have spoken well to the monks, the exposition on the corrupted and the uncorrupted. This is what the Venerable Moggallana said. The teacher approved. Elated, those monks delighted in the Venerable Mahamoggallana statement. That's the end of the sutta. So here you see the Buddha went to this hall to stay for the night because he was invited by the Sakyans And then he gave a talk to them. After the talk, it must be getting late, so they went back, maybe about 10 or 11 at night. And then the Buddha said, the monks are all still very alert. They don't have sloth and torpor. So he asked Venerable Moggallana to give a talk to them. So Venerable Moggallana gave this talk. See how Buddha and his disciples, they really value the Dhamma. So even though many of them are already Arahants, they still like to discuss Dhamma. The next sutta is 35.244. The Buddha said, monks, when a monk understands as they really are the origin and the passing away of all states whatsoever that entail suffering, then sensual pleasures have been seen by him in such a way that as he looks at them, sensual desire, sensual affection, sensual infatuation, and sensual passion do not lie latent within him in regard to sensual pleasures. Then he has comprehended a mode of conduct and manner of dwelling in such a way that as he conducts himself thus, and as he dwells thus, evil and wholesome states of covetousness and grief do not flow in upon him. Stop here for a moment. This covetousness and grief, as I've explained before, if you have desire and lust for sensual pleasure, then you want to covet it, you want to possess it. And then if you fail to possess it, then grief will flow in on you. So that's why these two states, covetousness and grief. And how monks does a monk understand as they really are the origin and passing away of all states whatsoever that entail suffering? Such is body, such its origin, such its passing away. Such is feeling, such its origin, such its passing away. Such is perception, such its origin, such its passing away. Such is volition, such its origin, such its passing away. Such is consciousness, such its origin, such its passing away. It is in such a way that a monk understands as they really are the origin and passing away of all states whatsoever that entail suffering. I'll stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying, if you want to understand the origin and the cessation of states that bring on suffering, you should understand the five aggregates. That's a bit surprising because this chapter is the sixth sense basis. Salayatana is a chapter concerning the six sense basis. But instead of saying that you should understand the six sense basis, here it says you have to understand the five aggregates, because the five aggregates, in the definition of suffering, the Buddha says, in brief, the five aggregates of attachment are suffering. So the origin of suffering basically is in these five aggregates: body, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. So to understand suffering, you have to understand the five aggregates, the origin of the five aggregates, and the cessation or passing away of the five aggregates. And how monks are sensual pleasures seen by a monk in such a way that as he looks at them, sensual desire, sensual affection, sensual infatuation, and sensual passion do not lie latent within him in regard to sensual pleasures. Suppose there is a charcoal pit deeper than a man's height, filled with glowing coals, without flame or smoke. A man would come along wanting to live, not wanting to die, desiring happiness and averse to suffering. Then two strong men would grab him by both arms and drag him towards the charcoal pit. The man would wriggle his body this way and that. For what reason? Because he knows, I will fall into this charcoal pit and I will thereby meet death or deadly suffering. So too monks, when a monk has seen sensual pleasures as similar to a charcoal pit, sensual desire, sensual affection, sensual infatuation, and sensual passion do not lie latent within him in regard to sensual pleasures. Stop here for a moment. So, if we do not want this sensual infatuation, sensual desire to lie latent within us, we have to regard sensual pleasures exactly like a charcoal pit. If you fall into the charcoal pit, you'll be burned and you'll suffer a lot. So if you understand this, then you know the danger of sensual pleasures. A lot of young people, they don't know. For example, we have a college nearby here. You find a lot of these college students, they are living together like man and wife. So they don't understand. One day, then the girl gets pregnant, then a lot of suffering will come because they don't realize this danger of sensual pleasures, like this charcoal pit. Sometimes you see in the newspaper, some baby is born and they just throw it somewhere. And how has a monk comprehended a mode of conduct and manner of dwelling in such a way that as he conducts himself thus and as he dwells thus, evil, unwholesome states of covetousness and grief do not flow in upon him. Suppose a man would enter a thorny forest. There would be thorns in front of him, thorns behind him, thorns to his left, thorns to his right, thorns below him, thorns above him. He would go forward mindfully, and he would go back mindfully, thinking, may no thorn prick me. So too monks, whatever in the world has a pleasing and agreeable nature, that is called a thorn in the noble one's discipline. Having understood this thus, as a thorn, one should understand restraint and non-restraint. Stop here for a moment. So here, people who don't understand the Dhamma, whenever there is something to enjoy in the world, like sensual pleasures, etc., then we quickly want to enjoy it. But the Buddha says all these things that are pleasing, agreeable, and give us happiness and enjoyment is actually a thorn, because when you become attached to it, then suffering will come. Either because it's impermanent or you cannot get it. Then just like a drug addict is hooked on to the drugs. Then when he cannot get the drugs, then he'll suffer like mad. So one who knows the Dhamma, we are very different from worldly people. Worldly people want to enjoy a lot of things in this world, but people who walk the holy path, the things that people want to enjoy, we don't want to enjoy. And how monks is there non-restraint? Here, having seen a form with the eye, or a body with the eye, a monk is intent upon a pleasing form and repelled by a displeasing form. He dwells without having set up mindfulness of the body with a limited mind, and he does not understand as it really is that liberation by mind, liberation by wisdom, wherein those evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. Similarly, having heard a sound with the ear, having smelt an odor, tasted a taste, etc., he is intent upon pleasing sense object and repelled by a displeasing one. He dwells without having set up mindfulness of the body with a limited mind and does not understand as it really is that liberation by mind, liberation by wisdom, wherein those evil, unwholesome states cease without remainder. It is in such a way that there is non-restraint. So one who is unrestrained in the mind, then he is moved by pleasing objects and displeasing objects of the senses. And how monks is there restraint? Here, having seen a form with the eye, A monk is not intent upon a pleasing form and not repelled by a displeasing form. He dwells